Better late than never. All right, so I'm just going to give this some context because recording started just now. So we're discussing rebuttals, and in terms of rebuttals, we're talking about the things to avoid. The first thing to avoid, could somebody reflect on what was the first thing to avoid? Because I've already talked about it and I don't want to repeat. Raise your hands and unmute. Don't unmute and then raise your hands. Doesn't make sense. Okay, nobody wants to talk about rebuttals. I mean, this is so I mean, why are you so disengaged, all of you?
Ma'am,
Yes, please.
ma'am, you basically elaborated on the fact that we should always ensure that our rebuttals are from an already existing argument in our speech, and we should not try to make new arguments which are not related to the topic.
True. Okay, that's one. Why do you think? Okay, now the reasoning I'm going to first give to you and then probably ask a question based on that. So this is one caveat or one warning that has already been given to you in terms of rebuttals and how you should do them. But second, a line of reasoning for why what a response should. I mean, what kind of a response you shouldn't give is on how a response cannot be like this. I mean, it shouldn't always be denial. Okay, it doesn't always necessarily have to be a denial of what the other side is saying, because sometimes you become extremely defensive about your case when you try to just stave off any problem that comes as a threat to your case. I mean, that's not the way to go about it, because I understand there is a need for you to rebut what the other side is saying, because otherwise they will take the debate, but it doesn't always have to be in the form of denial. And the substitute for denial is are these 3 points that are there on the screen: concession, mitigation, flipping the argument, and disproving. So disproving is just basically denial only. So disproving is the most obvious form of rebuttal, where we just go ahead and say that, oh, what the opposition is saying is incorrect. For example, if the opposite, I mean, sometimes it's easier to say that, right? So if opposition says that perhaps if they give you a wrong figure, if they give you a wrong statistical figure, then you can go ahead and say that, oh, their finding is wrong, and their citation is unfounded, because of which we take this clash. So denial is possible in this case. Denial is also possible in a case where they're not making the right I mean, they're not painting the right picture of what the world looks like or what joint families are like. For example, if somebody goes ahead and says that, oh, joint families is not so much about 10 people living in the family. Joint family could also be where there is a lot of siblings in the family. For example, if there's 6 siblings and only parents living, that is also joint family, just by the number of it. Then it's wrong. Okay, then also it's possible to deny for you, because you know that the structure of the joint family is not just about the number of people. It's also about how to what extent. I mean, it's also about the extended family. It's also about whether or not the people living in that family are your immediate relations, immediate blood relations or not, right? If it's not immediate blood relation, it's probably joint counts as a joint family. Even if they're like only 4 or 5 people, but from not immediate family, it should count as joint family. So in those cases, denial is possible. I'm not saying never deny an argument from the other side, but denial is not always possible. For example, in certain, like sometimes the opposition is actually making the right comment on what you said. For example, if I go ahead and say that, oh, loneliness is bad for a child, then opposition goes ahead and says that no, loneliness is not always bad for a child, because loneliness is also determined by your personality type, right? Which means your personality type determines whether or not you like being lonely. In that case, I can't say that no, my personality type has nothing to do with loneliness, and because I say that loneliness is bad, it should be bad. I mean, that's no argumentation at all. If you want to deny facts that are coming from the other side, that's probably not going to work, because facts are not supposed to be denied, they're supposed to be accepted. And I mean, make peace with the fact that the other people are also going to say some relevant stuff in their debate, insofar as they're rational individuals there to win the debate and have the same objective as you. In those cases where the people are saying the right thing about your case, but it is harming your case, you don't deny, you do other things, okay? And this is what we're going to talk about in terms of how to rebut and respond when you can't deny what the other side is saying. So, one clarification is that you can't always deny everything that the other side says. Work happening here. Give me 1 second. All right. Where were we? Yes. On the idea of what concession is then in the first place. Concession is one of the ways in which you can rebut the other side without having to do any argument.
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
Is this any better?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, give me 1 second now. The internet really acts up during rains. Wait. Okay, so first let me just explain what concession is in simple language. Does anyone know what is concession like in general English also?
It means
Do we-
giving up on something, like conceding something to your opponent.
Giving up, yeah, could we like refine it though? Like what could it mean in the context of debating?
I think in the context of debating, it could mean that you're giving up on a important point in order to make another one. Lose one to gain one, in a sense.
Yeah, okay. I mean, fair enough, but that's called a trade-off in the language of debating,
In
which is
debate,
also an
We'll
important
try.
concept. Yes, please.
So, ma'am, a concession in terms of debating could mean that we are trying to redefine that point in, in our benefit, in the benefit of our side.
Yeah,
Mrs. Concession basically like acknowledging the opponent's rebuttal and saying that I understand your point, but still saying that there's a different way to look about it. So you concede,
closer. Yeah, Aditya, I think you're closer to the point. Yeah.
you
I mean,
concede
what?
one point to build a greater picture.
Or is it like agreeing to your opponent to like end the argument in a place like where you agree to him and yeah, they just
Yes,
put your
yes.
name.
I think a concession is best understood in terms of a partial agreement to things. Like,
Hmm.
I concede that this has happened, but I don't think the impact is going to be what you say it's going to be. I concede that there is a harm out of what I'm proposing, but I also think that the benefits outweigh this harm, which means I've accepted your response about the harm, but I think the harm is still okay for me to have because I think there are other benefits that outweigh it. This is also where the somebody said about like talked about how there can be a trade-off, right? As to how I'm okay with a little bit of harm if it does a lot of good. So yes, that's also, I mean, that's a trade-off. That's called a trade-off where I'm okay with a little bit of problems in my side of the house because there's no perfect world that can exist, but I still think the society is better on my side of the house through what I'm proposing because there is also benefits alongside that harm, whereas on your paradigm there are only harms and no benefits. Or another way of going about this is saying that okay, we accept that the harm that opposition is pushing, which means that if I do this, then I understand in my world there's going to be this harm, but I think the harm on their side is bigger than my harm, which means then it becomes a matter, I mean, winning this particular argument becomes a matter of how to what extent you're able to prove your harm is less intense or less intense in magnitude or its outreach as compared to the other person's harm. Then it becomes harm versus harm, right? And whose necessary evil is the one that we need to go with, like which is the lesser of the two evils. That kind of an argumentation is pursued then. Is that clear? I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We are going to discuss more with reference to concessions, but is the idea clear of what concessions and trade-offs are supposed to do? Okay, now let's pick it up from top now because this is one of my, I mean, this is my personal document, but I'll I mean, you can have access to it as long as things are clear. Purpose of a response is, there are many purposes to a response, but the main is not to, I mean, can you all guess what the purpose of a response is if you're going to do it earnestly without looking at the screen? That is, don't tell me what's there on the screen because of course this is what I've written and I stand by, but something else.
can you
To
repeat the
put-
question?
What is the purpose of a response or a rebuttal in a debate?
basically,
Raise your
uh,
hands. Let's not let this be Ananya followed by Garrick. Only 2 responses needed for now.
Ma'am, I think proving our side to be better than the other.
Our side, okay. All right. What else? Four participants. Garrick, Aditya, Dia. In that order.
Ma'am, our response can be a way so that we can the wrong points or claim the misunderstanding that has been done by another opponent, and we can say it in our words and instead make a get a better point to hold out our points. And it can also be uh, a way so that we can pick one point and give one counter argument per statement of the opposition side.
Okay, I think we're on the same page in terms of what rebuttals and responses do and what the purpose is. Lower your hand right for now. I mean, I think I get the responses I needed. So yes, one, I mean, what are responses not supposed to do? Responses are not just meant for deconstructing the other side's case. It's also about forwarding your own idea through the response. That's why I'm also saying that rebuttal shouldn't be thought of as this extension or which is not relevant to the rest of your case. It is integrated insofar as rebuttal is also a way of proving why you are better and not just deconstructing the other side's case saying they are bad. I mean, you could definitely say they are bad in what they're proposing, but in the same through the same rebuttal, if it's smart enough, you could also say this is why we are better. Okay, extremely sorry about this.
Ma'am, control switched somehow. Shall I rejoin once?
Yeah, you can rejoin if there's an issue. Okay, continuing. Recording is in progress, right? Okay, it's being recorded. Cool. Cool. Let me just do this without sharing my screen, just so I can avoid being disconnected over time and time again. Okay, so we're talking about the relevance of the rebuttals, and now you understand why they have to be integrated and why it's important for you to not pursue them separately, because you also end up contradicting yourself a lot if you choose to do that. Separate two different lines of argumentations, one as a case, one as a line of rebuttal. No, that's not good. So now on the idea of a structure, what the structure of a response is supposed to be, because there is definitely, okay, I'm going to try sharing my screen because I don't like doing this without it. Okay, so there is an obvious structure of a response that you need to have, which means that any response should have a structure, and it shouldn't be just like a statement against one statement that's already come from the other side. Now understand, the other day we ended up discussing how a constructive or an argument is made up of three components, which is like assertion, analysis, and example, which means to rebut an entire argument which has three components in total, all of them well linked. A single statement would not be enough to cut through it if it's a good argument, which is why you should refrain from thinking that, oh, a rebuttal is a simple argument assertion that I'm giving against this very well built argument from the other side, because that seldom works. So try to make your rebuttal also as nuanced as an argument, that a rebuttal has a structure and it's not just like an isolated standalone argument. What is the structure of a response then? Tanishk, your hand is raised. Is it a question that I need to address before I go into the structure of a response?
No, ma'am, not exactly a question.
Okay, so everybody lower your hands just so I'm not confused about what it's about. So the first thing, when you go ahead and talk about the structure of a response, is reform. Okay, every time there is a person in the waiting room, I have to hold the meeting for everybody, which is sad. Okay, so the first step is reformulate the other side's argument concisely and charitably. Concisely and charitably being key terms here with emphasis on them. Reformulation is what? Somebody says something, but I have to repeat it, which means I have to concisely, meaning in a line or two, and not taking like your entire 3 minutes. In a line or two, explain what the other side is trying to say, which means I get to the crux of their argument. I don't take their argument as it is. For example, they say that, oh, loneliness might not be all that bad. What they're trying to hint at the crux of it is not that loneliness is not bad or that loneliness is good. What they're trying to hint at is that even in nuclear families, children can be happy in a space where nobody else occupies that space, right? As in a space where there is nobody else but only themselves. So I get to the crux of the argument and I put it like that. I said, this is what the other side means when they say this, or this is what their purpose is when they make this argument. After reformulation, concisely meaning in a line or two, and charitably meaning don't skew the argument. Don't think that reformulation means that you will say more than what the other side said or less than what the other side said in order to make it. I mean, don't try to mislead the adjudicators. Reformulation is not about misleading. For example, the other side says that, oh, loneliness might be good, but you can't just go ahead and say that, oh, panel opposition is saying that loneliness is always good. Because no, this is not what they said. Opposition said might be good, emphasis on might. So don't mislead the adjudicators. Don't even try to do that by saying that, oh, by skewing and saying that, they were saying that loneliness is always good. No, that's not what they were saying. And if you're misinterpreting it, it's on you, it's not on them. Which is why charitable means just understand the argument as they are presenting it and reformulate it according to what they're saying, not according to how you want to perceive it or how it's going to help your case. Because you have to accept what the other side is saying, no matter how harmful it is to your case, because only then will you be able to fairly deconstruct it. After you have reformulated in a line or two, in the second step, you strategize how you're going to rebut this argument. Panel, I have already told you what the argument is. I've told you what the purpose behind making this argument is, because no argument is pointless. It always leads to something. I've already told you about what we think our perceived purpose of their argumentation is. And now I'm going to lay down the structure in which I'm going to rebut it. For example, I can say there's going to be a threefold response to this argument. 1, 2, 3. Or I can say, panel, I will give you two reasons, one principle and one practical, for why their argument does not stand. So now I'm specifying the structure of my rebuttal, which is good for the panel to know, because they will be able to understand now that, okay, they have reformulated the argument and now they're trying to rebut it. Let's see how they're going to rebut it. If you say I have a structure to my rebuttals, even better, right? Panel will be, I mean, the panel is impressed at the outset, saying that, okay, they have some structure in mind. They are not lost. They know what they're saying and doing. But also because it helps you understand how many layers of responses I can have to an argument. You just don't end it in a sentence, because now you know it has to be a structure. It's a process. It's not just a sentence and the end of the story and you take the debate and win it. That's not how it happens. Okay. The third step then is to develop flag posts for your rebuttals. I don't know why it says arguments here. For your rebuttals. Okay. So what are flag posts? I want to say that loneliness is bad for people, despite opposition's claim that it might not be. I am going to flag post one of my rebuttals saying that, okay, this could be one of the rebuttals. I mean, flag posting is just you concisely in words saying what your rebuttal is about. That's flag post. Rebuttal is about loneliness being of a child as compared to an adult. Mute yourself, everybody. No more disturbances than there already have to be because of the internet. Okay, dependence of a child as opposed to an adult. This is the flag posting. Flag posting means I have tried to, in a 3 to 4 words, explain what my rebuttal is going to be about. My rebuttal is going to be about the dependence of a child and how that makes them unable to live, enjoy loneliness. A person who is dependent on almost everything on an adult cannot possibly enjoy loneliness. So the concept of enjoyment of loneliness is only for people who can do something for themselves, like go for celebrate birthdays, party, prepare for the exams by themselves without the support of a mentor. All those things. In the wake of the realization that the child cannot do anything alone, loneliness cannot then possibly be empowering. It's always going to make you feel bad because you can't do anything by yourself. For an adult, maybe what the opposition is saying is true. That's what my concession is about. Maybe it's true for adults, but where I don't concede is that it can also happen to the child. So do you understand how concession plays out in this particular response? Okay, I'll stop here and take Aditya's question.
I had two questions. One question was is that, is it possible for us in a response to first go with a strong opening statement, then reiterate the points and finally reformulate the other side's argument, or that won't work?
See, okay, so when I give you a structure, a structure for anything, not just for rebuttals, it's not set in stone, which means this is a structure that I follow and which helps me, and which maybe a lot of other good debaters have followed and they have shared in their workshops. You can always find your own unique nuances, but unless you figure them out, I think this is a structure you can rely on because it's worked for a lot of people. Cool.
And I didn't understand flag posts.
Okay, flag post. Okay, so sometimes your arguments are very lengthy and rebuttals are also lengthy, which means the adjudicators might get lost in what you're trying to get at. So flag post is just basically saying that, look, this is what I'm trying to prove by the end of this rebuttal. So that is what I put in the flag post. What am I trying to prove in my rebuttal is my flag post. I am trying to prove that there is dependence in a child. Okay, wait. Dependent children can't enjoy loneliness. This is my flag posting. What am I trying to explain in this rebuttal? Exactly this. Panel, by the end of this rebuttal, you will understand why we don't think loneliness can be enjoyed by a dependent child. And then our reasoning for that is dependence. Dependence is the keyword. An adult is independent, capable of enjoying alone. A child, not so much. That's what I mean by flag posting. Step 4 then is prove the relevance of the points made to the case, right? Why this response was important. What does this mean? I have already made a response. I have given a rebuttal. There is a structure to my rebuttal. I have probably given 4 or 5 rebuttals to certain points. Now there are certain things that you rebut and some certain things that you don't rebut, right? Because you can't rebut all of what the other side is throwing around. Sometimes they're just irrelevant things they're talking about. So if you choose to rebut one argument over the other, you in the fourth step of creating a rebuttal also have to explain why you rebutted the point you rebutted. Do you understand? I mean, I could be saying anything, but why am I saying that? What is its relevance to the debate? For example, I talk about so let's just say that rebuttals, I make this argument about how dependence actually leads to lonely dependence requires people to have company, and loneliness can be problematic. Now this is a rebuttal, but why am I making this rebuttal in the first place? How is it relevant to the case, relevant to the debate? I was a panel, we are making this rebuttal specifically because entire government case is the entire opposition case is based on this simple argumentation of how people could be introverted wherein they will enjoy loneliness. But there is a nuance that they miss out on, and which we introduce exclusively to the debate, which is that dependence like incapacitates you to enjoy loneliness, right? Which means the need for company is mandatory, is what we're trying to prove through this argument that we're pushing. Now this is an analysis for why you have made the rebuttal you have made. I want to prove that dependence leads to, I have proven the point that being lonely is not an option for a child, maybe for an adult, but not for a child. That is the goal. So you specify the goal behind the rebuttal also towards the end of it. Okay. I hope this isn't an information overload already. Is there any question that I might be able to help you guys with before we move on to types of responses?
Yes, ma'am, I have a question.
Okay, yes.
Ma'am, in flag posting, do we have to flag post every rebuttal we do, or just the very lengthy ones?
Okay, so I am assuming, not assuming, I'm pretty sure that in a 3 minute long speech, rebuttals will come in the reply speeches mainly. So keep that in mind. Rebuttals are not coming in your main speeches. Mostly it's reply speeches. So in a 3 minute long speech, I think if you are rebutting well, then I think you will be able to rebut only 3 points at max. If you're a fast speaker, 4 maybe. So if you flag post 3 points, I think it's okay for you to do that because that helps you have a structure. So try to flag post almost every point because that helps. But in case you miss out on that, you're not going to inevitably lose the debate. It just makes your debate better. But in the absence of it, you're not necessarily losing. Dia?
All right, ma'am.
Ma'am, like I am not sure if you mentioned this before, I really missed out on this. So suppose like as the argument example was mentioned that the proposition says that in joint families, people go in less loneliness because there's always somebody to talk to. But then again, it comes to the fact that the family should be free to talk to you, right? I mean, the members are supposed to be free to talk to you. So how does again the proposition answer this rebut?
Sorry, what is the opposition argument here? That family doesn't talk to you.
So the argument is basically that the proposition says that in joint family, children go less into loneliness because they always have someone to talk to. And then the opposition rebuts them by saying that all the members are not always free in some families, even after being a joint family, members don't talk to their children a lot. So what would you answer there in the as the proposition?
So the argumentation is the same as I posed initially, right? That joint
Yeah.
families, just the number does not ensure that the person is going to feel better between these people, no, regardless of what kind of people they are. Because, bitter. I don't know if bitter is the word to use for children, but you could say that there is a certain bitterness that can also exist in familial circles. It's not like families are like how they're supposed to be always. So the simple response to this could be that children, because they're children, do not get into the family politics. This could be a response, right? Which means, yes, my parents might not get along with the family of, like, my father might not be in the best on talking terms with his brother, but that does not mean his brother's children will not come play with me, because as a joint family, we think children are largely and mostly for the welfare of, for children's sake, of course, are excluded from this family politics, which means it does not really yield a lot of impact on them, insofar as they're removed from this internal tension that might go on in any given family. Plus, even in nuclear families, fights and friction occurs, right? Which means this is no reason for you to discount the value of family, which means the propensity of reconciliation is still more within families than it is outside of the families. I think this is one possible way of rebutting it.
Right. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. You're welcome. Types of responses then. One is disproving. I think I've explained.
Ma'am,
this.
I had a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just saw the hand.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I didn't really understand what is flag posting.
okay, flag posting isn't even something that you need to fixate on so much if you don't understand it. But flag posting is just like giving a heading. Do you understand? I write an article. I don't want people to lose interest in my article. I just give everything a heading, every smaller segment a heading, so that people are like stick around and they know what's coming in the next 3 4 sentences, so that they don't lose out on the interest. Do you
Okay,
understand?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Think
I
of
got
it as
you.
a heading.
Or
Then
like a subheading to
subheading,
the
yes,
rebuttal
perfect.
or
Okay,
whatever.
yeah. Uh,
Okay, ma'am.
okay, on types of responses then, which is the most important part for today's session. Disproving, I've already explained how some things can be disproved because they're factually incorrect or rationally insignificant, like logically inconsistent. But concessions, these are responses that concede, but you need to specify the extent of concession, which is very important. Like I concede that loneliness might be enjoyed by some people, but the like the place where I draw the line is where the opposition is trying to say that even people can enjoy loneliness. That's where I draw the line. I say no, only adults can enjoy loneliness. It's impossible for children to enjoy loneliness. Okay, so that's where my concession comes in, but I also specify the extent of that concession, and that's how concessions work in general. Now, on the idea of yeah,
चाहे मैं तू आ जाएगा मैं पक्की बात कर रहा हूँ
okay, Lavanya, mute yourself, please. Uh, Mitigation, implication. Now, what is mitigation? Mitigation is just simply, okay, somebody says, let's assume this. Proposition side pushes an argument, the same argument that we have been discussing and I've already discussed 1,000 times now. And opposition says that no, loneliness is actually preferred by some people. Now, let's just say that even if we want to buy this argument that even children choose to be lonely, want to be lonely sometimes, because sometimes families become clingy, right? They want you to be at every family function. They want you to never be alone because they think you will probably get influenced by bad things if you're not always under their scrutiny, which is why families sometimes pester you with their presence. That's why a lot of people and children today don't want to attend family functions nowadays. I'm sorry, because they think that, oh, I mean, they're too pesky, right? I mean, why can't I be with my friends, and why can't I be with my friends alone for a while if I that's what I need? So in that sense, maybe loneliness is also appreciated by children. That could be a counter rebuttal by opposition, in which case I have to agree that yes, this type of loneliness maybe a child wants. Temporary loneliness maybe a child craves, in which case I will have to buy this harm as it exists. I can't concede or not concede. I think this argument and the refined argument that they are presenting now is true, because I don't think I can rebut this. Can you guys rebut it? Maybe you can in some other way that you can think of. But I think a more rational way of going about this and a more safer way of going about this, a safer way of going about this is just accepting this as a truth. That yes, people sometimes want that kind of a temporary loneliness. They don't such thing. In which case, what is happening? Yeah. In which case, what you could do is try to mitigate the harm, which means I have to accept the harm as it is. Yes, loneliness is craved and loneliness is not being, I mean, you are not getting private space. Let's not even talk about loneliness anymore. This now becomes an argumentation by extension about how everybody wants some private space for themselves, some me time, and this me time gets killed if you're in a joint family. Because, I mean, joint family also means that you don't have a space to move. I mean, you don't have a lot of space to move around wherein there's not a lot of people. You will keep stumbling upon something or the other if there's a lot of people living in the house. So the idea of private space, which is important to people to grow and individually grow and not be like these dependent people all the time, is important. I can say that yes, this is a harm that occurs on my side, but I think we still mitigate it. What does mitigate mean? That okay, it's a harm, but I think it is still okay than some other harm that comes on the other side, which is how you mitigate. So I am saying this is a harm that occurs on my side, but on the other side, people, I mean, private space I can still look for. For example, everybody has a room even when you're living in a joint family, and everybody can request space in a joint for space in a joint family. But when you don't have a joint family, when you only have the house to yourself, it's all the more problematic, because then mental health issues etc transpire, but no amounts of request can actually help solve the problem or get it to your taste, which means on their side of the house, loneliness is a perpetual state of uh, being, but on our Okay, till where was I audible? I got disconnected over again.
Ma'am, you were speaking about that mitigation part. What is mitigation?
Yeah, but I was way into an example. So in that example, where you didn't hear the example at all?
Ma'am,
You were
it-
talking about extended arguments,
this
for
part,
example, about how privacy is important and how we're mitigating it by asking for.
Yeah. Privacy to is clear. No, yeah. I mean, I took last 5 minutes.
Like the last was still that they have their personal room and like they can ask for space.
To okay, yeah, cool, I can pick it up from there. So what I'm saying then is that okay, opposition tried to push this idea that look, loneliness is sometimes needed in terms of temporary loneliness. I say okay, temporary loneliness, I am mitigating this rebuttal by saying that temporary loneliness can still happen because my extended family is not my enemy. If I sit and have a dialogue with them, they will listen to me and they will give me that free space. Okay, I will tell that, I will say that okay, when my friends come over, I don't really like, I mean, some cousin coming in and badgering all the time. Is it okay if you don't do that? And maybe the cousin will listen. And most probably the cousin will listen because that's how, I mean, in a family, there's that much amount of like that amount of coordination can be expected. But on their side of the house, the loneliness is not, is perpetual, which means, okay, you need free me time, but you don't need me time all. I mean, me time is also just has a constraint after which it becomes a burden. You don't always want to be alone. Sometimes you crave company. You just simply crave change, which means your parents are out of their like, I don't know, out of their homes and in the workplaces. You can't possibly tell them to take a leave every day because you feel alone on certain days. So in your side of the house, it's difficult to solve problems that you are facing in terms of loneliness. Whereas in our side of the house, it's easier for us to strike a dialogue and get things sorted. Do you all understand? Do you all understand how mitigation works then?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's mitigation then. And if my internet functions for another 10 minutes, I'd be able to explain flipping responses as well. So now flipping responses is also a very interesting concept. And let me explain this with the help of this example. This house will impose carbon tax on individuals. So carbon tax is just basically the idea of how the whatever, if I'm using a lot of fuel, if I'm using causing a lot of pollution because of my day-to-day activities, I'm also liable to pay a tax which is commensurate to the kind of pollution I'm creating. So carbon tax on the basis of how much you pollute uh, is the concept. Now if you impose carbon tax on individual, so the government side could go ahead and make this argument here that look, imposing carbon tax on individuals is going to give people a reason to not drive their BMWs or Mercedes Benz cars. Because if they have to pay to use this luxury, then they will maybe switch to metro or other public transport measures. Do you guys understand this much? The argument?
Ma'am, your voice was breaking in between.
Okay, I'll come again with the argument. So this house will impose carbon tax on individuals. The government side could go ahead and say that carbon tax is, if you impose carbon tax on individuals, then the very rich people who don't care about environment but only luxury, who ride in their BMWs and like fancy cars, will switch to public transport because now they don't want to pay so much tax. Right? Do you understand? So imposing tax will actually help you uh, make people switch to public transport. Does that argument make sense? Yes, no, maybe?
ma'am, one question that arises here is that it is a good side for the government only that when they impose the carbon tax, they'll get away for the revenue of the country, the income of the country. It can help the government for the betterment of the people in some way.
Yeah, it can. So we are the government side. We are supporting carbon tax. That's the purpose. But now you've heard the argument. No, now hear it from the other side. How can the opposition flip this argument? So government has made this argument that look, public transport will be used more, which is all good because that way you will save the environment and the country would be in a good place. I will say no as the opposition. I want to flip this argument. I can say that okay, panel, let's accept that carbon tax is actually imposed. What is going to happen, according to the government's analysis only, is that the people, all kinds of people, the ones who drive cars right now, are suddenly going to switch to public transport, which means public transport accommodation will have to be increased by leaps and bounds, which means there has to be a lot of infrastructural change in the immediate future to accommodate the demand that gets created for public transport when everybody stops using their private cars, which means all the infrastructural development will lead to environmental pollution, because construction also leads to pollution that you're trying to save on government actually happens more on their side of the house if they make people switch to public transport in such a short amount of time, a period of time. Do you understand? The argument remains the same, the explanation remains the same, people are still switching to public transport in my side also. I am absolutely accepting everything the government says, but then I say that whatever they're saying is actually them, they're digging their own grave in a way, right? Because they don't know that this argument is actually going to lead to more environmental damage than less. Does that make sense, or did that confuse you all?
It made sense.
Okay, anyone else? I don't see a lot of positive response, because of which I'm dicey about what I said. So give me a thumbs up if you will, if you understood what I just said about flipping the argument.
And I had a question though.
Yeah, questions, yes.
That in flipping the argument, is it allowed to target the government for a policy which they made before, which backfired, or that won't be allowed?
Well, maybe not, maybe yes. Because see, if there is a policy that was good, but it wasn't executed well, so this time it could be executed well, right? So they could just simply go ahead and say that, okay, executed better this time, and yeah, things will pan out well.
Okay.
So don't do that. I mean, you could, but it is very context specific. You know, I can't say how it will be beforehand without like listening to the motion or the context. Cool. So now another thing that I want to talk about quickly is evaluation of responses and how the judges do it. Okay, so like when you give responses and rebuttals, the other side is going to do the same. I mean, since all of you have heard and since all of you have attended these sessions, all of you know how to respond, which means all of you are going to respond well to each other, which means you can anticipate the same kind of structure to responses from the other side also, given that all of you are attending the same training sessions. In which case, you have to keep in mind the evaluation criteria, that if both the sides are giving equally good arguments and equally good rebuttals, whose rebuttals and arguments are going to stand. It's based on what your arguments and rebuttals are evaluated on. So write this down if you have to, but it's okay if you're going to remember. Just make a mental note of it. One, it's based on probabilities and not absolutes, which means anything you say in a debate is a matter of probability. Is this likely to happen, or is what the other side is saying more likely to happen? For example, I say that, oh, there is going to be pressure on the public transport because a lot of people will be switching in a very short amount of time from private to like their own vehicles to public transport. Maybe this is going to happen, but maybe it might not. Maybe people might, maybe it's going to be a different world and public transport will also have an alternative. So what is this based on? What is any analysis that I have about the future based on in general? So I study at a good college, and even that is a matter of likelihood. If I study at a good college, I am anticipating that I will get a good job and I will get placed well, and then I will live a better life thereafter. Which means anything that you discuss with reference to the future is a matter of not absolutes, that this is definitely going to happen. It's a matter of probability. It's a matter of likelihood. Do you understand? It might happen. So who wins the debate then? The person who wins the debate is the person who is able to prove the likelihood. For example, if I am able to prove that pressure on public transport is likely to harm the environment more than people giving up on using their BMWs, then my likelihood is better than the likelihood of what the other side's proposition is, and that's why I win this debate. Everything boils down to proving why you think what you're saying is going to happen as opposed to what the other side is saying. What proves your likelihood better as opposed to what the other side is saying? I have to prove why I think things are going to be the way they are going to be because of certain factors, and those factors have to be relevant and logical. You can't just like make cock and bull stories, because that's definitely not going to prove probability in the real world. But secondly, then, what is more likely to happen in the given situation or some context? Okay, this is the same point likelihood. What can you possibly say without sounding irrational? Yeah, but the other thing that you need to remember while doing this is that you don't want to say anything irrational, which means uh, if you want to ensure that your likelihood stands and your likelihood assessment stands, don't just go ahead and don't go to extremes. For example, a lot of people say that to make the world a better place, to ensure environmental sustainability, we are going to run awareness campaigns. I mean, what is the likelihood of people changing if you run awareness campaigns? Tell me. Because I think people pollute despite knowing that they shouldn't, right? Which means awareness is not going to do anything. People already know the importance of not polluting the natural resources. They do it despite that, which means the problem is in the attitude and not knowing about environmental damage. Everybody knows about environmental damage, and they pollute regardless because they don't care. They don't care about future. They don't care about anything. They want immediate gratification. They will have it. That's sensibility. So you have to solve that problem, not the problem of there being no awareness. I mean, no awareness was a problem probably before 1960s, when environmental sustainability wasn't talked about at all. But today, everybody talks about sustainability, right? From grade 4th onwards, you taught about not cutting trees and deforestation, this, that, everything. So I don't think awareness is going to solve things. That is why don't make irrational claims. Don't make absolutely unlikely things that will not bring about any impact at all. So what is also important in proving things are, I mean, two concepts then is one, prove the harm that will come out of something. For example, if you are against neutral families, just have a list of harms and explain each and every harm. Do you understand? I think neutral families lead to self-centered individuals. Say self-centeredness is a harm. Why is it a harm? Because people become recluse, people become unengaging with the others, in which case they miss out on the possibilities of networking with people, and no networking with people leads to not just like emotional loneliness and all of those things, but also like not having enough opportunities to grow, because only when you meet new people do you understand the various possibilities there are for you, and you start developing your career or like growth or any other thing that you're doing through networking, right? So I mean, those kinds of analysis. But the other thing that's very important is impacting. What is impacting? I give an argument and I give a harm or a benefit. I mean, I will say that, oh, when people will switch to public transport, and I don't tell why switching to public transport is good. My argument doesn't stand then. I have to prove why switching to public transport will create the kind of impacts that is going to benefit the society. I have to enlist the impact which switching to public transports will be at. Because if I don't know what if I presume that the adjudicators know that switching to public transport means better environment, then you are mistaken, because adjudicators are not going to assume anything on your behalf. You have to tell them why switching to public transport is better than driving your own vehicles, probably, right? You'd probably go ahead and say that that panel, if people used to drive 4 cars from the same family because they had to go in 4 different directions, maybe now they are going to take that extra effort to drive in the same car and carpool, even if it takes a little bit longer, and they have to leave home a little bit earlier than they used to. But the thing is that now they are saving the kind of pollution that gets created from the when 3 cars run on a certain fuel as compared to only one, right? So that's my impacting. I am giving you the impact for why I think carpooling or switching to public transport is a better alternative. I think for today, that's it from my side. I'm happy to take questions. If there are none, we can conclude. Rebuttals and responses took some time, but that was also because my internet was a bit shaky today. Garrick, your question.
Yes, ma'am. My question is that last days that we were given the homework yesterday, that have any evaluation based on that or any remarks we gave based on that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to discuss that tomorrow, because tomorrow is supposed to be like more of like an activity session. So tomorrow, what we could possibly do is that whoever has prepared from the whoever is confident about the motion from the proposition side can be one team, and there can be one team from against the motion, and then we will just throw around some rebuttals and argumentation and see who wins, like a group activity sort of a thing. We'll do something around that on those lines. Dia?
Ma'am, I was wondering when we could have mock debates because like the qualifiers are on 14th. So
Yes, I mean, see, I mean, about mock debates, I think mock debates, I thought about it, and I don't think it's going to help all the people because I can't, I mean, there's so many people, right? There's so many people who are registered, who've registered and are participants, and not everybody will get to debate. So that's why I'm suggesting a group activity wherein like all of us divide ourselves into teams, proposition and opposition, and everybody can just rebut and argue back and forth.
all right.
Yeah. Kunal?
I had a question and you talked about the types of responses, and in that I couldn't understand concession, the concession one.
Okay, so concession is just basically when you agree to what the opposition side is saying, but not to what they're trying to say is the impact of what they're saying. For example, the opposition side says that look, loneliness is sometimes preferred by people. So I will say yes, loneliness might be preferred by people, but here is where I draw the line. I agree to that part of your argument, but I don't agree to the part of the argument where you say it's also preferred by children actively. So I'm agreeing to some part, I'm conceding, I'm not in the denial mode always, but I'm also drawing the line and saying that this is where I disagree.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Mohammed. I don't think you are clearly audible to me. No. Okay, please put your question in the chat. So many hands. I mean, I know. So whoever doesn't get acknowledged immediately, just like please put it in the chat. Yashna.
Hello, today was my first session as till yesterday I was out of station with really bad internet. So I'm not very sure about the, 1% debate or how the structure goes or how it's gonna so is it all up on YouTube?
It's online. Qualifiers are online. If you miss out on the sessions, you can go to the YouTube channel and like scrounge for the stuff you need. Ananya,
Ma'am, the qualifiers start on the 17th, right?
right?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Anam, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right.
It's Anam, but that's not an issue. Firstly, whenever the qualifier is starting, I wasn't able to hear the answer to the previous question. Secondly, have the motions been announced yet?
Not yet, and they won't be announced anytime soon. They'll only be announced like a day before the tournament or on the day of the tournament, depending on which class you're in.
Right, I'm in 10th.
Yeah, so yeah, not more than 24 hours for you to prepare.
All right, and when are the qualifiers?
17th onwards?
Onwards. So will we be receiving an exact date?
You will. The schedule
Right.
will be shortly shared with you.
All right, and they are online.
Online, yes. Only the semis and the finals. If you make it to the out rounds, are offline.
Right. And what's the format of the qualifiers?
Format of the qualifiers is one-on-one. I think for these kinds of questions, please go watch the YouTube videos because it's very difficult to deal with so many questions in an hour's time.
All right, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nishka?
Yes. Can you please explain the difference between mitigation and concession again?
Mitigation and concession.
Yes.
Okay, so concession is agreeing to something, but only partially, or even if you're agreeing to something, you after the agreement explain why you still are doing better than that, right? So it's not denial, it's a little almost the opposite of denying. You agree to the harm that's being pushed by the side. But in mitigation, again, you do agree, you try to mellow the harm, which means I try to find a bigger harm comes from them. Say that look way better. So please don't talk about the harm on my side. Focus more on yours. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
I think I'm just going to read the question in the chat and respond. I'm really sorry, but I'm struggling to, I mean, really straining to because my internet. I'm just going to read the questions and quickly respond. Rebuttal in the reply speech, or if you are the opposition, then you can rebut speech. Yeah, rebuttal in the reply speech. Yeah, so I was saying rebuttals can come exclusively in the reply speech, given that you have only 3 minutes and it's in the parliamentary format that you do otherwise. But yeah, in here it's okay for you to rebut exclusively in the reply speech. Yesterday I was absent, ma'am. So is the recording on YouTube? Yes, it is. Are we supposed to rebut in the response in the reply speech, or main speech? Will we fetch more points on our side? Which will fetch. Okay, rebut in the reply speech. See, nobody cares about as such which speech had what content, as long as you are able to rebut well. I mean, nobody's going to care about which speech it was in, but advisably, reply speech should be kept aside for rebuttals exclusively and weighing, and the main speech should be more about what you're pushing and analyzing it to the various extent. Uh, are we supposed to rebut in the response speech? Achha, this is already done. What are the for and against teams? There are no teams. You have argumentation from both the sides, and I think this is the senior category. So you don't need to know about this beforehand. We'll just randomly divide ourselves into 2 equal halves tomorrow for the sake of the debate. Or like the group discussion, case prep. Ma'am, what will be the schedule after tomorrow? Arshia, I'll tell you that tomorrow itself, I have to have a team meeting before I get back to you on that. So in a trade-off, you try to outweigh the cons with the pros, and the mitigation and mitigation is saying that the situation could be worse. I'm a little confused. Yeah, I mean, trade-off and mitigation can be very similar in that sense. See, a lot of these responses will overlap in terms of what they do. Is the demarcation then is just to help you explain all, like help you understand all the dimensions better. Otherwise, if you see overlaps, don't think of that as you getting confused. It's actually what it is. Mitigation, concession, trade-off is very closely linked to each other. So they will overlap. Don't worry about that. Okay. More questions coming in. I checked on YouTube, ma'am, but the video for yesterday is not there. The video for yesterday, for one final time, I'm explaining this. No, yesterday's video wouldn't be there because you were assigned an activity. But even for the session before that, we lost that particular recording because of some technical glitch. Zoom acted up, my bad, but now we don't have it, can't possibly retrieve it. So please make peace with that. And junior session still has all of its recordings, and the content discussed is all the same except for this session, which wasn't designed for the junior category because it's a bit complex. So everything else in terms of what you've missed so far is also explained in the junior category, just in simpler words, which shouldn't be a problem. So go watch those. Ma'am, there will be no teams. I mean, there will be no teams for the sake of tomorrow's case prep. Otherwise, there is one-on-one format, no teams, yes, even there. I hope things have been clarified. Thank you all for joining in. Sorry with for my like internet issues and everything. I see that Kabir is unmuted. Are you saying something which I can't hear? Okay. Thank you all for joining in. Tomorrow onwards, just try to engage more. I think there's very disappointing engagement levels from the senior category. I'd like some engagement. Other than that, thank you for joining in. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.